But if you look at it from the top, it just feels like going in circles. But if you remember that, yeah, that's a normal part of business, and you recognize that, okay, I may be looking in the same direction, but I am higher up. I have the experience from last time. I have more tools. I know who, like more who, not how, to tackle this. You will solve the problem faster. By being faster, you will expend typically less resources, and you will continue building momentum rather than stagnating much faster. And so the interesting thing, I come from extremely metricized, tangible, some would say like male-dominated environments, right? I worked in energy, natural resources, mining, finance, strategy, tech. And when I started my business in this space, so many of my clients, 3, 6, 9 months in, they were giving me this feedback of like how they had changed. So they're like, I lost 10 kilos, my marriage is better, I have so much more fuel in the tank, I make decisions faster, I see the business differently, I am more passionate, I feel more confident calling myself a CEO. And of course me, I'm like, oh my God, the numbers, like, what about the goals we set? And they're like, Alex, you set our KPIs.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe the key to scaling and compounding your wealth and life starts every single day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more all the way to help MVPs. My name is Brett Swartz. Each and every episode, we're joined by the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, or billionaires, where they share their secrets, wisdom, and insights with us so we can all level up and make a bigger impact. Hey, we're also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channels, so we appreciate all the listeners out there. I'm excited about our next guest. She is a strategic growth architect, keynote speaker, podcast host, and the creator of the CEO Recode. With 15 plus years of experience leading billion-dollar deals, scaling companies, and advising executive teams across 4 continents, she has helps impact-driven entrepreneurs and executives unlock their cheat codes, building high-performance businesses that scale without leading to burnout. She's been featured in all kinds of amazing, big-time places, and she's here with us to drop some wisdom. Please welcome to the show with me, Alex Snider. Alex, how are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me, Brett. Doing amazing.
Excellent. And for our listeners to get to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Oh gosh, yeah, try to keep it tight for you guys. Hindsight's 2020, so when I look back, my journey is very winding, but it all led me to where I am. So from my athletic days, which shaped my strategic thinking and my leadership skills, through a number of scrappy trial by fire, always learning, always problem solving, different roles, to an MBA, to strategy consulting, to operational improvement, mergers and acquisitions. And then I took a fairly abrupt decision to not continue on partner track. I left the corporate strategy space. I sold everything, decided to be nomadic and explore things that were a little bit more purpose driven and impact focused, because impact is truly what gets me out of bed. In that time, I partnered into a startup, co-founded another. There's a very long story around that, but did successfully exit. And what I do now is I work with entrepreneurs and executives in my company, Leaders Who Build, and we work with those high-level, high-functioning, but often over-functioning leaders who are in growth mode, who know that they have built something incredible, but getting to the next stage requires them to change their role, the way that they function, and the way that the company operates. And so we work with strategy, operating structure, organizational models, process governance, and team culture to drive that next level of growth.
Okay, this is incredible. By the way, people got to check out Alex by going to alexsnider.com. Operate your business like a well-oiled machine, which is what we're going to talk about right now. Alex, what is the number one secret to doing just that? How do you mentioned over-functioning leaders, you mentioned high-capacity leaders, and this podcast is more for those who probably have achieved that $1 million at least in revenue or net worth or more, and they're really looking to press it to that $1 billion mark. So what would you say is what you found the number one secret to operate your business like a well-oiled machine?
Totally. And that's my sweet spot. I've worked in the big space. I've done $2 billion carve-outs. My clients today are typically $1 million to $100 million in revenue. And you face a lot of the same things as you grow. And perspective is an insanely powerful tool, because if you dealt with something, you spent a lot of time fixing an issue in your business. And let's say you did that at like 10 million. And now you're at, 70 million. And suddenly you're like, wait, we're having a problem in that department again? Like, I don't know how language is on this show. What the heck? you can get really discouraged if you don't realize that that is, a vista point as you go up and up. But if you look at it from the top, it just feels like going in circles. But if you remember that, yeah, that's a normal part of business, and you recognize that, okay, I may be looking in the same direction, but I am higher up. I have the experience from last time. I have more tools. I know who, like more who, not how, to tackle this. You will solve the problem faster. By being faster, you will expend typically less resources, and you will continue building momentum rather than stagnating much faster. And so the interesting thing, I come from extremely metricized, tangible, some would say like male dominated environments, right? I worked in energy, natural resources, mining, finance, strategy, tech. And when I started my business in this space, so many of my clients, 3, 6, 9 months in, they were giving me this feedback of like how they had changed. So they're like, I lost 10 kilos. Like my marriage is better. I have so much more fuel in the tank. I make decisions faster. I see the business differently. I am more passionate. I feel more confident calling myself a CEO. And of course, me, I'm like, oh my God, the numbers, like, what about the goals we set? And they're like, Alex, you set our KPIs. Like, we've exceeded them. We 3X'd the revenue, we 2X'd the team. How I feel and how I see the world and operate is fundamentally important. And that was a huge revelation for me, where I realized kind of the tangible and the intangible, they amplify each other. And so when you ask me about like what is one of the most common important things, I work with a lot of self-made business leaders who have been exceptional problem solvers. They've also held it together for everyone since they can remember, right? They're trying to be everything to everyone at work, at home. That's the over-functioning. That's what high performers, high achievers were often very good at, myself included. I never say anything to a client that I have not at some point needed to hear myself, essentially. And so the interesting thing is there are lots of elements to growing a business, but if as a leader you do not grow alongside your business, it gets very messy, and your business will outgrow you. And that is either where things don't get done, stagnation, you lose money,
Burnout or all the
and
things,
then
right?
burn out. So it's like the business either runs out of money
Mm-hmm.
or you run out of gas, or both.
Okay, and
And
this is making sense. I'm going to try and get it. So it's basically a mindset of understanding that as a part of scaling and growing, that you have to have a kind of a dual track of leadership and growth and personal growth alongside of the business, and there are going to be challenges on both sides, and that's normal and that's okay. And now the question is recognizing that, taking a bigger picture and saying, all right, then who can help me to unlock that next level of growth, success? Is that a fair summary so far, Alex?
absolutely. So what you said, and that who might be someone like me coming in as an advisor, but it also might be, do I have the right people on my team? Do I have, the right peer group that I'm spending time with? We are evolutionarily primed to gravitate to the norm of our societal community, tribe, whatever word you want to use. So all of those who's are very important. And then the other side is having enough self-awareness, which is the first step of real growth mindset, to understand that there are likely ways I need to think, operate, decision make differently, and be open to that growth.
You know what the worst thing to do is when you're selling a business? Paying huge capital gains taxes. In fact, they're about 20 to 50% of the sale. And if your client is selling, whether you're a business broker, M&A advisor, financial advisor, they have a large capital gains tax problem. And guess what? We have a solution. We build capital gains tax solutions for sellers of highly appreciated assets, including real estate, including businesses and other assets. And we want to encourage you to take action today to learn about what solutions are available. So think about a business, think about real estate, think about other assets that have at least $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain, and the sale is going to result in 20 to 50% in tax. So what can you do? Well, you can build a capital gains tax solution with our team. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com or click on the link below to get started. Okay, excellent. Let's move to the number two. I guess we're talking about operating your business like a well-oiled machine, but it's almost like operating your mindset and growth like a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. And so talk about the next kind of, once you have the proper perspective on this, what's the next secret to leveling up that you've seen with the entrepreneurs that you work with?
So I think probably again, high performers, we can handle and juggle a lot of things. But like we're still not optimal when we do it. Now, if you take that into your team, you are exponentially multiplying the suboptimal way of working by having trying to do everything all the time. And so there's lots of things I do, but we get to this point after we've done the big picture and the strategy and the operating plan where we're like, cool, 90 days. What is actually going to be accomplished? What is most important? And what will move the needle? And so this is where I will be very strict with my clients depending on how big their team is and what stage they're at, how many priorities they can have. We break that down so clear. So it's not like, oh, this one big thing we want to do this year. No, like what is the first step? What is the action? What is the deliverable? How is it broken down into something that should be yes or yes done in 90 days? We really don't want to be rolling over because that's kryptonite to momentum and kind of team morale. And it is really commit to less, get more done, ruthlessly prioritize, but also strategically sequence. The big thing is not always the first thing. So whenever you're working on a priority, it is going to deliver you more resource, more people, more money, something, which will then allow you to put that resource towards the next priority, the next building block in the big picture.
Okay, that was awesome. That was really concise too. That was great. So, so let me make sure I caught that. What is the most important, like the big domino, maybe, right? If you knocked out this big domino over the next 90 days, that would increase obviously the cash flow, increase the people, increase the capacity, and commit to just that and get that done, right? Also assess your team members and do they have too much load or do you not have enough? They have too much on their plates, and that is a strategic way to sequence. Is that a fair summary so far?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And just really quickly to say, like the big domino, but if it's too big, it needs to be broken down into concrete, actionable chunks that can be measured.
Give us a big example here, like break down like maybe a recent one with a client that you had to help them like take it down the chunks and to break it down the steps.
Yeah. So, okay. So, for example, a client wanted to expand, but they wanted to expand by opening a different business model within like a physical type of business. And so I was like, okay, that's great, but that's an entirely other business model. So, like, step one is not looking for real estate. Step one is not, figuring out the financial requirements. Step one is figuring out what is the business model, what are the operational requirements that you excel at, and what would you need to learn in order to build the plan that then tells you what is your budget for property, do the research on locations, map out the capital spend to build out the business, right? But like step one was like, do you even fundamentally know this business model? Even though you are incredible in your space, it was something that would cost more, would require a different team structure, would require a different real estate footprint. So I was like, hey, let's backtrack and see whether this even makes sense and whether your strengths align to running this kind of a business. So
Got it. Okay, so that's really key, right? I think of like the energy thing, like the strengths plus the energy, like, and what's going to pull, is it going to pull too much of your strengths and your energy away for this? So either it's not just strategically sequencing for what's the most important thing, but it's also strategically sequencing your most important asset of yourself and finding the other person who's probably going to be more fit for that. I've heard a saying, Alex, what do you think? Like a CEO should really be doing three things, right? Number one, casting massive vision over and over and over again. Number two, unblocking huge roadblocks that the rest of the team hasn't been able to solve. And number three, going and closing, the largest, deals, whether they be strategic alliances or like the big new opportunity, right? So kind of those three things, and everything else is, I don't know, waste of time is completely the right word, but it's just really, really low value for the CEO's time. Is that a fair summary? What would you add or subtract to that?
I love that perspective, and I think it's really interesting because one of the things I often say, especially if I'm working with founders rather than an executive who's been brought in, is as a founder, you, one, don't have to be CEO. So you could be a really creative person who runs a brand and product software development company, and you could bring in an MD And you could be head of the creative team. If that's what lights you up and that's where you excel and that is your superpower, that is totally okay. And I think that that's one thing I will say is like determining your role once the company achieves a certain milestone is part of what I do very early on. And I'll be honest with you, the first part of our workshop with my new clients can be really emotional because I will be like, you need to be honest with yourself, to be honest with me about what you want from this company and then what your role in life looks like then. And that space is something that not a lot of people have had held for them, and it can be quite uncomfortable. But we're going to work extremely hard, so we might as well build something that is what you actually want and that you've thought about. So you do not necessarily have to be CEO, and or there are, in my opinion, different flavors of CEO. And probably the third point I would have made if we'd continued on in the trajectory is understanding the role that you want, the superpower, which in my description is kind of like zone of genius, but I think it's skills and expertise and experience mixed with innate characteristics that make you incredible at something, and figuring out how the business needs that applied and how you spend more time in that role. And so there's that. And then also, what are your cheat codes, which is how do you work best, which is going to be around environment, routine, rhythm. Like for me, travel's a cheat code. For many people, it's a detractor, but it's because I know how to handle it and I've done it for 2 decades. But also how you engage with your team. And so the promise, I'm coming back to your question, which is traditional CEO who is vision, strategy, partnerships. Yeah, I think that is a really traditional role, and I think if you get it right, it's powerful. And yes, it's framed that way because those 3 things go together, and you can delegate pretty much everything else with a high level of autonomy to the right operators and heads of departments or C-suite or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, I think, by the way, I'm going to pause you on this because this is so good. I think too many founders, and maybe it's an 80-20 rule, maybe 80% should be that more traditional, but the 20%, I feel like too many founders just go into this CEO because that's just what they thought it would be, right? Or should be, or is the default. So I think obviously, yeah, understanding that. I think about like personality types, right? Or like you said, like the working genius or creative genius, like understanding who you are and what your strengths are. And you said it really well. You said, figure out what the business needs most, right? And that may be you in that CEO role, or it may be you in that more creative head of that role. I made me think like a Walt Disney and a, I think forgot his brother's name, but the other Disney. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that Walt was that's probably maybe an extreme example because he was so creative, but I don't know that Walt was the CEO, right? But he's definitely the head of creative stuff, right? And where that goes. And so I think that's an important conversation to have. And you're right. I think that can be the traditional way of thinking about it needs to be at least be examined. Is that a fair summary on this point?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. What's the next point here? You talk about some cheat codes. I like that. I like that idea of cheat codes. Let's talk about AI and cheat codes. How are you using now AI and helping CEOs get some more margin and more time and more productivity and all of the above?
Yeah. So really quickly on cheat codes. Cheat codes are understanding basically your operating system and how you function. So for me, like I said, travel for a lot of people is very challenging. I have traveled enough in many, many forms, from living out of a suitcase as a consultant to being fully nomadic and not having a home. And I also I'm a bit of a burnout connoisseur. I've tried every flavor. Don't really recommend any of them, but I have understood, and I think McKinsey was one of the first ones to publish papers around this, of burnout isn't necessarily a volume of work issue. It is a purpose and resourcing issue, right? So for me, I've doubled down over and over on my health and invested on that. And I understand how to maintain my resourcing, sleep, movement, nutrition, different modes. As someone who is neurospicy as well, like understanding how my brain works. So travel is a cheat code, partly because I know how to handle it, partly because I go out and I get super energized, connected, inspired, and then I come back and I do lock-in mode where we deliver on all the ideas. And then there's a bunch of other things around movement and other things that are cheat codes for me and how I engage. And so AI is really interesting in that space because I would argue if you are not good at running a team, you will likely struggle with AI because you need to be very clear and very intentional and very focused with teams. You need to have good communication, you need to explain things very well, you need to hold accountable, give feedback, and ultimately using AI in the maybe more traditional sense initially. It's different if you're having, agents built for you that have processes built in which case it's like flexible SaaS. But if you're using AI as something that you engage with in a kind of conversation style, it can be quite interesting because you get, if you're someone who doesn't work as well in isolation, for example, you're not good at just sitting down with a blank page and doing the thing. AI can be incredibly fruitful in helping you extract your ideas, structure your thoughts if you're not somebody who's great at, okay, how do I turn what I am actually very knowledgeable about into a structured piece of work or presentation.
I
Obviously,
feel like it's the creative entrepreneur's dream, right? Because you're right.
yeah.
I think at least for me, I know when I speak, I tend to strategically think. It's more I think and strategically out loud. It's kind of back to the movement part that you were making there. But it sounds like we both played sports growing up and all the things, right? And the idea of getting your body moving and your brain moving and blood flowing and everything in a momentum state helps to just create more creativity in general. And then if you can superpower that with AI, right, where you're not having to, I think it's just like punctuation and grammar and all all the things where it's like I just want to be able to flow and then let it clean it up and let it make it more, clear and clean and all the different things. I use it all the time now for emails. That's pretty straightforward to do the first draft at least. Mm-hmm. How are you finding these agents or for entrepreneurs, which ones are like, okay, use it day to day? I mean, that's probably a pretty common one, but are you seeing like, oh my gosh, this agent is changing the game for some of our clients, whether it be the people in management, the process and governance, the leadership identity, like your framework, is there one that you can kind of share that helps to give an example of this in real time?
So there's two things that came to mind when you asked that. So one version is, let's say, I send my teams on trainings all the time, right? Whether they're contractors, employees, I treat them like employees. We do one-on-ones, I invest in them. Because I want them to learn certain things to step into bigger roles rather than me learning the thing. I don't want to do that role, right? And I try very hard to walk my talk. However, I also am at the point where I will take things that we've invested in or I've invested in and the program and the structure and the knowledge, and we'll feed that into an AI so that it can do a level of strategy, a level of planning, a level of program, calendar, campaign development. So the things that you would be like investing in training wise, you can turn those into AI to a degree. And I think there is an element of like process. I think AI is incredible for processes as long as you put the right parameters in place and obviously have safety checks, which you would do with people to a degree anyways. But with the other side that made me think of was a client I was talking about last week, I think on Saturday, and it was talking about there was a piece of data coming out of the sales team. And this is a great example of where you said like the CEO connects the dots that other people aren't connecting. A problem comes up, you don't necessarily know the root of the problem, right? And individual departments, unless they have these things in place that I like to help create, they don't necessarily work together to figure it out. So a problem came up, they were getting a high volume of recharges and returns, and they recognized that there wasn't sufficient customer support post-sale. And so what people were doing was doing like chargebacks versus returns or just getting some coaching through whatever purchase they had made. And so the technology team turned around and were like, cool, we have to build this huge, massive thing and it'll be 6 months. And he was like, no, like we have a problem today and this is impacting cash flow massively. I won't go into more detail, but it was a huge issue. And so what they really needed, and this is the conversation we had, was you need to make sure that someone answers the phone anytime someone calls. And an AI can answer the phone and ask you if it's one of 4 things, and then it can keep you on hold until a human answers. And then you can start building out process one for AI to support that. And then you can build out process two. But in the meantime, AI can solve the problem of the very basic thing, flip it to a human until we've created more elite, high level, complex systems within it. And so I think one, AI can help with customer service, customer support, but it has to be good. And so trying to either flip it on for everything immediately is a bit of a recipe for disaster and potentially reputational damage and cost implications. But also trying to build Rome in a day is not feasible, and waiting 6 months to turn it on is also a losing game. And so I think understanding how it can be, just like anything else, one brick at a time and building and kind of fail forward, like build and ship is a delicate balance, honestly.
Okay, I love it again. That's great. I'm curious. I'm implementing one. We're in the process of training the AI tool to answer the phones, right, and do just that, kind of qualify and give them an opportunity to book right there live, which is great, right, with our sales team, and to be able to move the process forward rather than always having someone answer the phone and qualify and then book. It's taking out that element to speed things up, and to get better customer service. So that makes a ton of sense. I want to shift into exits a little bit. It's part of what we do here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions. And so entrepreneurs build their businesses, Alex, and they work with you, and like, boom, they 3X, they 10X, and they're like, gosh, now I'm ready to maybe have a large exit. And maybe you've had a large exit and you're like, gosh, but then there's a lot of tax. And so am I really going to give away 20 to 50% to the government, or is there other ways to build an exit in such a way that capital gains tax is momentum for me because I can defer it, versus it being a detriment either to selling and or just crushing my net worth? So I'm curious, for entrepreneurs that you work with and business owners, what's been the biggest frustration when it comes to capital gains tax exit planning?
I love that question. And I will always say an exitable business is a well-structured and profitable business. So really, we should all be building to that standard as much as possible. And I have been through an exit. I do have clients in that space. I also work in the startup VC space, so it's a conversation that I talk about a lot. And I'm always looking, that's why I was so excited to connect with you, for great service providers in that space. As somebody who has spent the better part of 3 years optimizing my own tax setup, I've worked with a variety of experts internationally and domestically in different countries. So I think not thinking about it early enough is probably the biggest issue. And I'm sure you see this all the time. This actually applies to anything in business. It is always easier to build intentionally than to fix or wreck and rebuild. So for myself, that is absolutely part of session one. And it's not a definitive decision, but it's understanding what's on the horizon in my client's mindset and making sure that we talk about that in our vision and strategy components. And then I make the connections for them if that's something that we're moving towards in the next 3 to 5 years, so that I'm not a tax expert in every country, and my clients are in tons of countries, which I love. So I really do rely on being the person who identifies the risk and the opportunity and connecting them into the right experts in their jurisdictions for that. I definitely wouldn't go into any specifics because it's going to depend where you're listening from.
Totally. Yeah.
But I have had many conversations with clients and with peers and friends about the implications of what an exit would actually mean on paper. And it is very hard to stomach giving up a multi-2-digit piece of a business that you have poured your heart and soul into building.
Okay, so love that, and I'm gonna propose what's called a well-oiled exit plan. Okay, and I'm gonna say, what would that include for the benefits, right? I think number one, if I'm an entrepreneur, what I would want is the ability to first defer the tax, at least, right? Have an extra 20 to 50% working, so that's important. Number two, I want to make sure my tax flow, my cash flow, my debt flow are all able to navigate with this next piece of my personal life or my business life, meaning I have the ability to have entrepreneurial freedom, which would be the most important thing, I could use it to fund my next business venture, all right, versus having to get, debt from somebody else or get, VC money. I would want the ability to diversify. So meaning I can go back into, real estate, or go back into businesses, or go back, partner with people. I'd want that flexibility, go into, Bitcoin or stock or something where I can diversify my wealth. I'm not stuck into just one thing. I'd also want the ability to have some asset protection, right? So some protection from creditors, right? So to protect some of the wealth. And then I want the ability to do some estate tax planning as well, because I might be over those limits. So I want to say, hey, how can I set my family up and eliminate what's called the death tax and the estate tax? These are just a couple of the things that I would want to do. I'd also be able to maybe form like a family office approach where advisors could come around and help me with this, because it may not be a one size fits all. That would be my weld oil exit plan. Just some basic things here. Also, I'd want to be able to partners to be able to separate a little bit. Partners can go their separate way and have their own exit plan that's not having to be commingled with my other partner, because we might have different needs at that point, or different visions for the future for the wealth. What else would you add, just as benefits? Like, what else would you, if you had a perfect weld-oiled exit plan, what would you add to that, Alex, that I haven't said already?
A lot of what you said ties into the idea of legacy, which again is often one of the main things people are building for. So I think that, generational thinking, flexibility. I think the other thing that comes up a lot is, again, the world is a lot more global, right? And so where do I want to live? How do I want to live? And what is that how does that constrain me or free me up to make decisions around, jurisdictional residencies, international banking, things like that, which again, if you're based in the US, it's a little bit more of a challenge sometimes, probably requires more finesse than certain other countries that are not citizenship-based taxation. But that is something that I would add. I'm definitely predisposed to it, having lived and moved around and internationalized my tax footprint, both corporate and personal.
I love it. I think that's a great one to add to the list. I'll have to see how that goes. By the way, if people want to learn more about what my company does here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions and have a large exit coming up, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We also wrote a book on it called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. And it's my story as a real estate wannabe, helping entrepreneurs who are exiting real estate and businesses and not having a great plan for them during the 2008 crash. And then we figured out a cool plan. We think it's an amazing plan, and we want you to check it out. If you have a large exit, you just go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That being said, Alex, are you ready for the lightning round?
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. Number one CRM that you use.
Oof. The one that I see used the most is Go High Level these days.
Okay. Excellent. Number one AI tool that you're using the most.
Cloud Cowork.
Excellent. Number three, number one most curious thing, or what better way to say it? What are you most curious about right now?
As of last week, I am the most curious about how we make fundraising a safer experience for female founders without creating female-only rooms as the sole solution.
Okay. Oh, that's a really specific. I like that one too. Number one, leadership quote and theme that you strive to live by.
Oh gosh, I'm an amplifier at heart, so that's kind of what sits strongest with me. I'm failing on coming up with a quote. But
That's okay. It's an amplification theme, a theme of amplification. That's fine. I love that.
Yeah.
And I guess it's knowing your strength and using that to bless and encourage and strengthen others.
Simon Sinek has a lot of good ones. I just can't think of the one at the moment.
All good. All good. Next question. What's the number one book you've recommended the most in the past year?
Oof. In the past year, it's probably The Big Leap. But the book I used to give to every single client at the beginning, regardless of where they were at, was Atomic Habits.
Excellent. I love it. The very last question, we'll wrap it up. Alex, you've been so generous with your time and your expertise and your wisdom today. I want to thank you for sharing it. And this is kind of the thesis or the premise of the whole podcast, which is, build it to billions so we can give more, all of it away. But we believe it's by practicing a stewardship mindset over ownership. So I'm curious, when you hear that, what does it mean to you to be a steward versus just an owner?
Well, so I think that's actually really fundamental to the way that I work with leaders who build. My goal is to mature the organization and the leader into sustainable, profitable growth. I don't want my clients to be dependent on me, and their business should not be wholly dependent on them. That's how we build ecosystems. And then again, with the clarity of what you're building for, and then the resource and fuel and left in the tank to do meaningful, impactful things. Impact gets me out of bed. My clients are able to then, create a better working environment, work for their clients, build their communities. I really believe in that. It's a huge part of what I do, and why I divide my time the way I do. I built my company to have time to do impact-focused work without worrying about how or if it compensates me, and that lights me up and inspires me and keeps me cutting edge for my clients. So it's a really beautiful loop.
Amazing. Alex Snider, if people want to find you, one last time, what's the best place for them to find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Alex Snider, or Leaders Who Build. Very easy. That's where you can, peep my crud, see what's coming up, alexsnider.com. And if you're just curious where I am in the world, and if I went to the gym today, that would be on Instagram at Leaders Who Build.
Amazing. Thanks, Alex. I also want to thank all of our listeners or viewers for being a part of the Build It to Billions podcast, also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. Hey, we're on this journey with you to scale from millions to billions, so we give more all the way to help MVPs, the most vulnerable people. My name is Brett Swartz. I want to encourage you to take action today. Hire the Who and Alex to help you scale your business. And if you have a large exit after you scale, or you're going through a large exit, it could be Bitcoin, business, real estate, stock with these IPOs that are going on, with these AI stocks, SpaceX that just happened a couple days ago. Guess what? You need a capital gains tax exit plan. Why don't you build that with our team here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions by going to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We appreciate everyone listening or watching out there, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye now.